Hey everybody, Cameron here from Solace. This morning we announced some big news, and I'll be joined shortly here by the Jonathan Schabowski to talk a bit about what it all means. Before we dive in though, I would just like to give a proper introduction here to Jonathan. The guy has done some incredible work throughout his career over the last decade. And so here's to calling it out a bit. So Jonathan is a senior architect in the office of the CTO at Solace. And prior to joining Solace, he architected large-scale, truly mission-critical enterprise systems for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, who a few of you watching may have heard of. And he also worked on the GOES-R satellite ground system. So GOES-R is now called GOES-16, and it's operated by NASA and NOAA. And it's really the most, I'd say, the world's most elite geostationary weather satellite. So if you've received a weather forecast in your life, you've likely benefited in some way from that tech. Jonathan's focus and passion is on the use of event-driven architectures for microservices and their deployments into paths running within public clouds. So all that to say, Jonathan Schabowski is pretty much the most equipped human being to explore the details of our news today. So let's welcome him here to the live cast.
Hey, Cam. Hey, everyone.
Whoa, hey, Jonathan, that was quite an abrupt entrance there.
I'm here.
Maybe knock next time or ring the doorbell or something.
Yeah, I'll consider that for the next live stream.
Cool. So Jonathan, before we dig in here, I have a little confession to make. If you're all right with that.
I'll consider it.
So for most of my life, when I think of Salt Lake City, where you're based, I would immediately go to Stockton and Malone. I think of these beautifully executed pick and rolls from the Utah Jazz. And now, honestly, I think of you over there, kind of architecting the future. So,
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Those were some great days of Utah Jazz basketball. Of course, always losing to the Bulls was not ideal.
Yes,
but they did have Jordan, so that's okay.
They did, and Pippen. Don't forget about Pippen.
That's true.
So yeah, well done. You've replaced two NBA Hall of Famers in my mind space. But actually, believe it or not, that's not what we're going to talk about today. So let's dig into the big news, what we announced. So a few hours ago, we announced a capability within Event Portal, and for those somehow not yet in the know, Event Portal is our product for discovering, visualizing, and cataloging event streams. But what we announced today, though, was the general availability to discover event streams from Apache Kafka clusters, right?
Right.
Break this down for us. Who should care about it? Why? And why us? Why did Solace feel compelled to build this functionality?
Yes, I mean, it's really been a very interesting road for me personally, and I think for this Event Portal product, in that whether you're using Kafka or Solace Event Brokers, ActiveMQ, Rabbit, what have you, sort of your biggest strength of decoupling of your applications and your microservices kind of becomes your biggest weakness. You start to lose track of who's consuming what events are even available for consumption. The business is largely left out of these discussions because, again, kind of your messaging system or your Kafka cluster is this black hole of data. Yeah, data does come out, but it's sort of in a very niche, specialized use case. And so what we started to notice when we were talking to a lot of customers is, people aren't just having this problem with Solace Event Brokers, they're having this problem with Kafka Event Brokers. And really, the idea, I think, around managing your event streams like you do your APIs. Everyone manages APIs today with API management solutions and documents them. Why wouldn't we have the same kind of capability for event streams? And who wants to sort of manually input all of that data? Don't you just want us to be able to sort of scan your Kafka cluster and determine what you have? And that's exactly what what we're announcing today is this ability to scan, reverse engineer, and document your Kafka event streams.
Got it. Thanks. So based on what I'm hearing there, can enterprise architects, not just use tools like Jira and or PowerPoint, Excel, API management, et cetera? Is there a need really for another tool in the mix here?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'm totally sensitive to probably everyone who's watching this live cast of, do I need yet another tool? I think we're all faced with a lot of vendors sort of saying, hey, here's another tool to solve a very, bespoke problem. But I think the answer is yes, because sure, you can, create a PowerPoint diagram or a Visio diagram and sort of model what your event-driven data flows are. You can write a Confluence page to try to advertise what's available in your Kafka ecosystem, and you can use a tool like Confluent Control Center as an example within the Kafka ecosystem to sort of look at your schema registry and your different schemas that are available. But really, that in of itself is a challenge. Having all of these different tools that all aren't synchronized is I would say the biggest challenge. In that, day one, maybe you were able to document that, but certainly day two, who remembers to keep all of this updated, synchronized? That was the bane of my existence with the FAA and GoZar, in that you've got all of this agility powered through event-driven architecture. However, everything sort of gets out of date, and you start to wonder, what's the golden source of truth at this point? And so that's really where the event portal comes into play, is both from providing a better experience to really model what your driven architecture is. It's easier than doing a PowerPoint diagram. It's richer than a Confluence page as it relates to keeping track of all of these relationships. And I would say significantly, now you do sort of have precision. You have now a gold source of information that is validated against the runtime with this discovery agent. So you never sort of have that nagging question of, is the information I'm looking at even correct? It is correct because it is validated against the runtime. So to answer your question, yeah, I think you do want this tool because it really sort of combines multiple aspects of tools, but guarantees precision.
Got it. Thank you. When a lot of technology leaders in this space hear event management, hear Kafka management, especially, Confluent Control Center, might be at the forefront of their thinking. It's going to be the Stockton and Malone that I mentioned earlier, right? Is Confluent Control Center different? Is it compatible? What should architects know in this regard?
Yeah, so it is 100% compatible. I mean, I would say, to use your Stockton and Malone example, right? Confluent Control Center is the Malone, right, of the Utah Jazz. It's doing the heavy lifting. It ultimately is responsible for sort of managing this really complex infrastructure. But ultimately, John Stockton did have to sort of pass the ball, right? He had to give him the ball for all of these assists. And I think what the event portal's real job is the management and the governance. It's being the point guard on the on the court of your event-driven architecture. Also recognizing, yeah, you've got Malone, sitting there with your Kafka cluster. But what about all the other surrounding players that probably exist within the ecosystem? Your ActiveMQs, your RabbitMQs, your IBM MQs. Yeah, maybe IBM MQs getting a little old. It's about to be retired, isn't making very good shots these days. But at the same time, you do need to distribute events between all of your different players in order to sort of stitch together your team, which is your enterprise, right? So I think that Control Center is going to continue to be a vital part of most Kafka deployments. I'm sure there are people that run Kafka completely by themselves from an open source perspective, and yeah, by all means, knock yourself out. The event portal itself, we're really trying to deliver on a very crisp mission, I would say. That mission is to provide a single place to manage and really govern all of the events within your ecosystem. So your ecosystem is all of those different players that exist on the court, but you do need a centralized point guard, I would say, to make sure that sort of everything is a well-oiled machine within your enterprise, that all of your dependencies are kept track of, and that really all of the data that your organization maybe has in very, bespoke, expensive integration projects over the last decade has made available, that now you can understand what is all available, so that you can really key in the new age of analytics of taking all of these different event sources and streams and really aggregating them together and having new insights. I think the event portal, if nothing else, is the place to manage and govern all of the events. Nice.
Another question likely to come from that same group is, what about Schema Registry? Can Apache Kafka users use that instead, actually?
Yeah, so Absolutely. And I think that they should. So really Schema Registry, and I wrote a blog on this, a couple months ago. I'm sure it'll, our marketing folks will somehow link that in here. I wrote a blog about how really, while a Schema Registry is a really great capability, it's not, in of itself, it's not enough. It was really created to solve a very specific problem. Well, I guess two problems within the the Kafka ecosystem. One is what data formats are available, so that you could write K-streams and K-SQL queries on that data. And two was sort of the backwards forwards compatibility problems because of the decoupling that exists within Kafka and just event-driven architecture in general. Consumers, aren't all the time resilient to changes in schemas, and so sort of how do you deal with that relationship? And so while it does that really great, it's not something that sort of a business user or the enterprise architects necessarily want to be looking at, because again, you have a different Schema Registry, within all these different teams. How do you aggregate all of those different schemas up into sort of a view that you and I could sort of, digest? Think of sort of the way that the web is crawled today, where web crawlers go and search for all this information. Well, we just use Google to try to figure out where to go. That's very similar, again, to the way the event portal works, in that we integrate with Control Center and Schema Registry. We mine it for data, we crawl it for data. We then allow that data then to be sort of hosted within the event portal from a management and governance perspective. So the other thing, I guess, to take away from this is, by all means, do not think that we're a replacement for a Schema Registry. We integrate with a Schema Registry. Great.
Most people that know Solace know of us because of our event brokers. And so I can just imagine, some viewers out there wondering, hey, do I need to be using Solace brokers, to take advantage of the benefits that you just laid out there with Event Portal?
Yeah, fundamentally, no. I mean, as much as I would love to sell everybody some more Solace event brokers, I mean, that is, on the GoZar, satellite mission, that was where I became a customer, right? No, the fundamentally, again, going back to that mission statement of providing a single place, the idea is you can have our event broker or not have our event broker. You could have a completely uniform Kafka ecosystem, and I think still have some pretty good advantages of using the event portal product from an enterprise perspective. But I think really the reality of most enterprises is you're going to have at least one event broker type. If you're paying attention to this, you probably have Kafka. But I would challenge you to look around, even within your own Kafka deployment. What connectors are you using that connect up other different event broker types? And how are you actually kind of dealing with dependency management and all of those kinds of things across all of your other event broker types? I mean, I see RabbitMQ deployed alongside Kafka all the time, kind of queuing capabilities on Rabbit, streaming capabilities on Kafka. Legacy on TIBCO EMS and IBM MQ, and maybe a little WebLogic JMS because you used Oracle Service Bus. Like, all of these are really the reality of the large enterprise. And I bet you, and this isn't a knock on you, right? Like, I was in the same position as you. You probably aren't managing those things well because you didn't have a tool. So now you have a tool. Yeah. So I think now this allows you to sort of, I would say if you're in one of those organizations, sort of be a hero, like use this tool, try out this tool, and like fundamentally start to manage and govern all of your different, event-driven resources.
Got it. Speaking to those heroes, those potential event-driven heroes out there, I'm curious what you would say to someone who says, or just maybe they're thinking, there's no way my company is going to purchase another SaaS product, even if it does help us deliver, on the promises of event-driven architecture. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so I think I hear you, but I think one of the great benefits of software as a service in general is the ability to sort of have a very easy path to trying something out and seeing if it has value. So I think if you were to take and try this out, it says you can do a 60-day free trial, no limits. Scan your Kafka environment or go through the code lab that we have with New York City Taxi. I think what you'd very quickly be able to find, maybe even within an hour, is whether this has value to you. And if your organization isn't super keen on using software as a service, that's fine. It's on our roadmap to be able to support sort of a self-managed ecosystem from a product perspective. So if you find value, talk to us about all the other deployment options that we could provide you. But kind of keep in mind that without sort of a software as a service offering, like who wants to sort of download and install and get permission from your IT team just to install something? Like, first figure out if this has value, and then let's talk about actually how you would roll it out.
Yeah, 60 minutes, an hour to figure out if you need a SaaS product. That's not typically how it goes. So that's pretty good.
Yeah,
So,
and if it's more than 60 minutes, also contact us, because it shouldn't be. So
okay.
But I think, like I said, if you do the code lab and you get started that way, that's definitely under 60 minutes. And then I think the next step is, take the new offline discovery agent for Kafka, point it at one of your developer or test Kafka clusters, and see ultimately what you have. Because one of the things that we have seen with this is, we're announcing general availability now, but we've had a very long sort of, open beta before that, closed beta before that, early access program. So, I mean, we've been running these Kafka scans in, tens and tens of different customers. And so one of my favorite cases was like a gentleman at a pretty large financial institution that, obviously we have a relationship with them because they use Solace as well, but they also have a pretty large Kafka estate. So we said, hey, can we scan your Kafka environment? He was like, yeah, I don't know. Sure. I don't think there's that much. So you could almost see there was almost a feeling that he would be embarrassed by how small this scan would be.
Right.
So he scanned it, and lo and behold, I mean, they had 6,000 topics, a couple hundred connectors, a couple hundred consumer groups. And even he was like, holy crap, right? Like, A, I didn't know we had that much, and B, we have none of this documented.
Wow.
And so I think that's sort of the aha moment that a lot of you are going to have is, wow, we have more than we thought. Now, what happened? Who's producing this? Who's consuming it? What documentation, I think, of the business moment. I talk about this all the time of just because you're looking at a schema is just data. What is the business moment of how that data is changing is the key to understand. And that's why you want to start to document these things, just like you, again, documented your RESTful API so that other people could consume them. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with your event stream, which was built for data sharing, right? Publish and subscribe.
Jonathan, I wanted to come back to an earlier point you touched on. You mentioned reusing events and schemas across an enterprise. And it just made me think, data teams here, application teams here, do they talk to each other enough? How can they do a better job on that communications front? And maybe kind of to wrap that up, like does Event Portal, how does Event Portal for Kafka maybe tie into that communications dynamic? Yeah,
so a great question. It was funny because I had a conversation about this actually with a Gartner analyst a couple of weeks ago. And so, I've always been a little bit perplexed, I would say, that application teams, they kind of are enclaves onto themselves, let's just say, right? And then you've got data teams, and data teams sort of are the guys either creating the canonical data models, or they're sort of more on the data analytics side. And somehow, they don't talk to each other, right? And so the collaboration in a lot of cases is missing because obviously applications are being created so quickly these days that the data teams don't even know about maybe very valuable data that is available for free without it having to reintegrate, right? Like it's available as a Kafka stream. Conversely, the canonical data model guys, they're trying to sort of lay out what are these business objects really looking like, but without knowing what applications are really kind of producing and consuming them in a lot of cases. And so what I think they've been really missing is, a place to sort of go off and collaborate together, collaborate in real time about what the real designs are. And so sort of an analogy I was thinking about, sort of in preparation of this is sort of like a pub, right? Like a pub is a place where people go to get together, to have a few drinks and actually talk about things, right? And so, I kind of was thinking, the event portal in a way is kind of like a pub, right? So imagine sort of the architects and the data guys now being able to sort of collaborate and talk about the impending changes that are going to happen and what are their ripple downstream effects. And if you're using Kafka connectors, what about the ripple effects outside of the system that like you're even focused on, right? Like these are the things that I think, notionally definitely need to be managed and discussed. And really have the real time, insights as to what's really going on so that, you can really solve whatever the mission or the problem that your company really has. So yeah, I guess what I'm really saying is maybe during your 60-day free trial at some point, grab a beer, collaborate with your friends within the tool, and I think you'll see that it can be a real benefit.
The pub metaphor with PubSub. I remember it was like 5 years ago. We had those PubSub stickers, and it was kind of like people sitting around at a pub.
The marketing here revived the pub on a sub sticker.
Yes.
Like it was a hilarious sticker, and B, I think the pub metaphor with this tool definitely makes sense.
I need one of those in my life on my fridge. So Jonathan, lastly here, could you just lay out the user journey? You touched on it a bit, but can architects try before they buy? What does that process look like right now for somebody who would want to get rolling?
So it's really simple. So I think probably streaming on the bottom is a link that you can click on, and ultimately that'll take you to the event portal sign up page. So from that sign up page, you're sort of faced with, I would say, sort of a couple different journeys, right? But journey one is you're developing a greenfield, event-driven architecture. So you use Designer, but really the path I think you're going to want to take if you're a Kafka user is the discovery path. So that is as simple as either download the discovery agent pointed at a Kafka cluster within your organization and see what the results are in the staging area, or if you sort of want to kick the tires a little bit before taking that step. And you want to sort of see what value you have. This is, again, where you could use this Google Code Lab and either point it at a Kafka server that we have up and running, sort of to where you get to play with the discovery agent itself, or you could just skip that whole step, download the discovery output file, and then sort of go through staging. And staging is really where you sort of go, okay, like what are the consumer groups that I found? What are the topics? What are the connectors? What are the schemas? And you can see what did we reverse engineer? In a lot of cases, I think we're getting about 50 to 60% of what you actually have from an architecture perspective reverse engineered. But you, as sort of the domain expert, still have to fill in some of the blanks. So you fill in the blanks within staging, commit it to the event portal. Now it's available within the catalog. It's within the designer. Go play with that, document things, show it to other teams, start to collaborate on what you already have, and then I think you can do all of that easily. Take the first couple steps within a small amount of time, but then I think as you start to work to roll this out, looking to see how it works with other teams, I think it'll become pretty obvious.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time here, Jonathan. And,
thanks, Cam.
And thanks to all of those who tuned in. We're super excited, as you can tell, about Event Portal for Kafka now being GA. Beta phase, as Jonathan talked about, has been fantastic. Product teams fired up to keep delivering. And in the comment section here, you'll see a few helpful links and resources for getting started. So definitely check those out. And that's a wrap over here. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.